anyway, obviously we're on a discussion about where the NFT markets we think it's going. What's interesting in where it might be going in 2022 after its spectacular rise in last year and 21. But yeah, if you want to sound off, give your roll call, that'd be great. Who wants to start?
Yeah, I don't want to start, I can start. Yeah, so my name's Tom Farron. I'm a tech reporter at Cointelegraph. Really, I write a lot about Web3, about NFTs. Super interested in NFTs myself personally. Collected quite a few. So yeah, I've been on this podcast. I think is it twice now, Stuart, or 3 times? I'm always happy to come on and share my views with everyone. So yeah.
Awesome. Cool. How about you, Ben?
Hi everyone, my name is Ben Palmieri. I am the Director of Communications and Growth for the Global Blockchain Initiative. Global Blockchain Initiative is a blockchain education non-profit. We're currently running a free-to-enroll blockchain basics academy covering everything from blockchain and Bitcoin all the way up to things like AI and distributed computing and stuff like that. We've got 4,500 students from 126 different countries enrolled on the campus. I'm also the host of the DAOstronaut podcast, which is unsurprisingly talking a lot around DAOs. And then I'm also the CEO of Disintermediate Limited, which is a Web3 consulting firm. So anyone who's looking to get more involved in the Web3 space from a business sense, we are there to kind of help make that process a little bit easier.
Nice. Wow. You know your stuff. And Toby, over to you.
Yeah, no, great to be on the show for the first time, Stuart. I'm Toby Lewis, CEO and founder of Novum Insights. We're a research firm of DeFi, crypto, and NFTs. Been in the crypto space for about 5 years. Also recently set up a new fund called MetaLink Capital. We were deploying capital into DeFi and NFTs over the last couple of years, and that was like as a little family office. And are now expanding that into a regulated fund out of Gibraltar. But just generally absolutely fascinated by the DeFi, crypto, and NFT space. Super happy to be here.
Hey, nice one, Toby. And I know you're about to fly to Madrid, so maybe we could ask you, especially drawing on your data-driven insights, to kick off and give us your thoughts to set the scene, if you like, about where you think the market's going. Then, Toby.
Yeah, so our analysts, we recently put out an analyst report on the metaverse, and we estimate roughly $10 billion was invested into metaverse companies last year, from probably nothing the year before. I mean, it depends if you count Roblox or early kind of, I guess, Web 2 metaverse projects, but like I think the Web3 metaverse, where we think of Sandbox and Decentraland and all of these kind of things became huge phenomenons in the last year. I mean, they've been available in the case of Mana and Land since the kind of since 2018, but I think we're definitely going for a huge bull run. I mean the rise of Bored Ape Yacht Club is a great example of that. They recently raised like a $4 billion valuation, backed by the likes of Andreessen and Horowitz, and I think it made many king vape makers in the NFT crypto space already. It's nice to see that there was a big thing between them overtaking the full price of the punks, which I guess where the NFT OGs had sat. But I just think it's all of it is exploding in lots of different directions. And I think the NFT space is really, really cool because it's very, very accessible to sort of everyone. Like they can kind of understand, here's a piece of artwork. It gives me access to certain things. I think behind that access, there's some problems. I mean, I think a lot of NFT projects struggle to really articulate the value of what they're providing. But then a lot of us buying NFTs and playing around with them and creating them are, I guess, really in that playful experimental mode. So we're all the early adopters who don't really mind. I think as there's more and more hype, and they are quite a scary, weird space where suddenly something that someone bought for 0.03 Ethereum is worth 10 Ethereum, and then it's suddenly worth 3 Ethereum. And it can feel like an insider's rigged game to certain people who are perhaps get caught up in the famous FOMO, or fear of missing out, we talk about in the crypto space. But I think they're generally a super positive development for the crypto space because they're relatively easy to understand. I mean, you have anyone from sort of Eminem to Reese Witherspoon to you name Z-list celebrity jumping in. So it's kind of, it's fun, it's varied, and it's I think one of the building blocks of crypto going forward. And I think that putting alongside the fractionalized traditional token market and adding them to NFTs gives you building blocks to build interesting economies. And I personally think it may be a slight hype cycle, but in some ways we're just getting started.
Nice. What's your take on that, Ben? Would you agree with Toby's largely optimistic approach?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting space to be in at the moment, and I think part of the reason it's so interesting is, as Toby said, like the accessibility of it, especially when you consider that in the wider context of Web3, because one of the biggest issues that a lot of the projects and a lot of the companies and protocols that I've spoken to, one of the most common problems that they're experiencing is education. Because as Toby said, like we are early adopters, and that means that we don't really mind too much about having to like mess around with some technologies which do to a certain extent feel unfinished at times. Like I remember when Binance Smart Chain first launched and trying to get transactions to go through on PancakeSwap, and then getting myriad failed transactions, and then having to like delete the zero off of the selling and then re-add the zero to make sure that it went through. Like that sort of thing is something that we don't mind doing, but the average person looking to get into the space isn't going to have the patience to mess around with that sort of stuff. So the fact that like NFTs have helped make things that much more accessible in terms of helping people to kind of understand one of the core concepts of Web3, which is ultimately disintermediation. It's being able to engage with creators on a direct basis, be that in the form of like NFT artists, or be that in the form of projects or whatever. Because there is that cultural aspect to it with the NFT movement, it does make things that little bit easier. Now, again, agreeing with what Toby was saying, there is a bit of a hype cycle going on at the moment. I mean, the best way to understand what's going on there, I think, is just like look at the most common designs for NFTs, and you'll get like 5,000 different varieties of monkey. Like, why is everyone using this as the blueprint for their artwork? I mean, it's because there is some hype associated with ultimately like Bored Ape Yacht Club as the kind of the most famous of the monkey-based projects. But the great thing about it is the space moves so quickly and is so dynamic that a lot of the criticism that I am seeing at the moment is that it's a bubble. And I mean, to a certain extent, they're right. Like, it is a bubble, but it's not a bubble in the sense that, in the traditional sense of the word, because if you look at like traditional finance and traditional markets, this sort of activity ultimately results in an explosion and a massive crash. And that sort of activity is happening all the time in the NFT space. You're seeing projects explode with, like, as Toby said, going from like 0.03 ETH all the way up until like 10 ETH and then dropping down to 3. Like, that sort of activity in any normal market would be completely unsustainable, and yet this is happening all the time. So you're seeing this really interesting movement of capital ultimately, and of value around these spaces, and it's moving so quickly that it can be quite difficult to keep up with. But again, because there is this cultural aspect to it, and because there is something kind of tangible and more easy to access than, again, like interacting with PancakeSwap or something like that, then it's just pulling more and more people in, because this is the first time that we've seen this kind of engagement possible in a strictly kind of cultural space. It's been fantastic as an opportunity for artists to connect with their fan base in a way that hasn't previously been possible. It's been an amazing way for people to actually put a value on digital art, because there's like the meme, like, just right click save as, and like, yeah, to a certain extent you can right click and save as, because that's what everyone has done up until this point. As a digital artist, you haven't necessarily had the ability to monetize your work in a way that is going to be sustainable for you, but because of NFTs, there is now this possibility. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see where things go over the course of the next 12 months or so, because I think that art is ultimately only a very, very, very small part of what NFTs will evolve into going forwards.
Nice one, Ben. That sounds interesting. I like your emphasis on the art side of things. Hey, I just noticed, Corey, you've just joined us. You're over in the US, is that right?
Yes, yeah. Sorry, it's early in the morning here, so I'm getting my daughter ready, but I just wanted to drop in and say hello to everyone, and thanks, Ben, for the invite.
Corey.
Yeah.
Remind us, where are you based? Who are you working with, Corey?
I'm in Portland, Oregon, in the Western U.S. Yeah, so I'm the founder of Brand New Voices, which is a kind of a education content company right now, and I'm sort of like taking the position of an NFT advisor in between a lot of communities. So I've kind of been traveling all over Web3, but I'm landing in NFTs and NFTs and community in particular. So that's kind of where I'm specializing in.
Cool. Let me come back to you in a second. I just wanted to, because we've been talking with Toby Lewis from Novan, who's been giving his insights on NFTs. He'll be dropping out shortly, and then obviously we heard from Ben, but I wonder if I could just jump to Tom, who's been following everything that's going on via his expert work at Cointelegraph. What's your from what you've been hearing, Tom, and excuse my flattery, but you're the man with the finger on the pulse. What's your take on where the market's going with NFTs?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite an interesting space. So I'm going to echo the points that Toby and Ben made. I think that we're going to see a transition away from like art-orientated NFTs, and these like static PFPs that we see a lot. And I think that's what the retail market believe that NFTs are, but I think that's the first iteration of them, really. We're going to see like access passes, like memberships, like so many things. I think the NFTs is really going to be like the digital passport to like an array of metaverse worlds, online experiences, anything that you would have in the real world, but it's going to be on a digital format. So I think that's going to be really impactful, and we're going to see a lot more utility with NFTs. And I think like on the point of like the massive amount of derivatives we see in the market, and I think in 2022, I think authenticity is going to be key. And you've got to distinguish yourself from the crowd when you see cartoon animal photos, and just a continuation of the same sort of theme and the same structure, the same number of items. People are going to have to kind of move away from that and try and stand out from the crowd a bit more. And I think it won't be, as I said, it won't be much about the visualization of it. The actual the actual artwork. It'll be more about the underlying utility. What can you receive from this NFT? So yeah, I think that's one of the points really. But yeah, it's an interesting space, but I think it's going to be unpredictable, and it's going to surprise us all. And I don't think it'll go in the direction that we all kind of agree on at the moment. It's going to be, I don't know. It just goes wherever it wants. NFTs. It's a cultural thing. Culture changes all the time. So there could be some things that impact in society, in the world, and the whole space will just go where the culture goes, I think. And
cool.
Yeah.
Stuart, if it's okay to jump in, because I'm going to be dropping off now.
Please do.
Fantastic chat, and I think one interesting thing, I've been getting involved in quite a lot of, I guess, startup NFT projects in the 0.1 to 1F range, sometimes at the sort of whitelist stage, and it's really interesting how hard it is to build up like the strategy, the roadmap, the way for these projects to go from essentially often some good programmers, some good artists, some fun ideas, some gamification, to being winners, right? Like so, and sort of. I say this as someone, I bought a mutant ape fairly early on, but flipped it as they were getting extraordinary in value. And actually now I probably regret that, because the reality is the value of these things, I think, will accrue to a lot of the winners, because they need the resource to be able to be like the apes and build their game. I mean, we saw the World of Women. I've still hung on to one World of Women. I'm just sort of thinking, well, I'm never going to sell it unless it reaches 100 ETH, is kind of what I've sort of said to myself now, because like it's having had that kind of seller's remorse with the mutants. I think it is a really strange market, and like Tom said, basically it needs more and more things to justify the value behind it. So you're going to see the best in breed that can get these huge valuations will become the ones that really, really attract. But then you'll get other countercultural ones rising up and new things springing up all the time, right? The startup thing is hard, but I'm going to sign off there anyway. So thanks for having me.
Nice one,
Cheers.
Toby.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers, Toby.
Cheers all. Cheers all.
Hey,
Bye.
have a good flight.
Yeah, I wanted. If I could. It's a really interesting conversation, because I think in the NFT space, obviously everyone is having this same conversation. I guess I take I take a bit of a different approach, a different view than most on especially the utility, the roadmap. I just wrote a post about this, just kind of funny, this yesterday or this morning, about that, and then to address like derivatives. So I'm involved in probably, I would say, probably the most interesting NFT project that is out there right now, which is the MFers, the MFers NFT. And I was an early holder of them. And, as a lot of people know by now, it has no roadmap, no utility, no nothing except just the art. So this brings up, obviously there's a lot of speculation as to what's going on, and it's a crazy kind of culture. But my framing of, and the reason I even got into that NFT was to explore that specific reason behind what is a CCO, public domain project. And there's not a lot of them out there. There's like Toads. There's a few of these that are but now in the community and in NFers, we say the toads crawled hopped so we could fly. And I think it's really what the way that we're looking at derivatives is that derivatives, and the way I look at it anyway, is that it's actually a healthy thing to you heard a lot of the issues with the derivatives come from IP, and that's Web 2 in my mind. So there's this obviously there's this clash of what is art and what is, but we can't say what is art. No one has that. The art is subjective, and that's what NFTs are all about. I call it the people part of crypto, because it really is that's what draws people in to crypto and keeps them there. And you see it in DAOs, you see it in DeFi, you see it in all forms. It's usually an NFT lead in to something. And so like the derivatives are interesting because if you look at NFTs from a storytelling point of view, it's a much different framing than just copycats. So, like if you look at Bitcoin, and so I study, mimetic theory and mimetic desire, and lots of these are classic. This is how society and new digital society is being built through mimetic desire, mimetic modeling, and those could be called derivatives. We see this in Hollywood movies. When a cartoon movie comes out, another one comes out, a part 2 comes out, a part 3, and they're the same model. So we do derivatives all the time in society, but we typically don't call them that. And so I don't see any reason why Bored Ape, like when Bored Apes comes out and becomes $1 billion brand, of course they're going to copy. People are going to copy them because they need to understand what are the keys. How does this thing work? And so that's kind of how I look at, and in MFers, we look at it like the derivatives are simply telling a continuation of the story, which brings up another interesting point about, do we need roadmaps? Do we need utility when the community is building it? Right. So that's another just sort of thing I wanted to throw out there for food for thought. So interesting conversation though.
Yeah. Wow. Who wants to reply to that one, Ben or Tom?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Corey. I think that utility and what the NFT allows you to do or something is to a certain extent a meme in and of itself, because like the roadmaps that projects are coming up with are getting progressively like more and more creative, and also depending on the capability of the team, more and more difficult to actually execute and deliver on. So I think like a lot of the time this incessant need to add utility to a project comes about because of the nature of the individuals who have started the project. So I'm going to go out on a bit of a limb here and then kind of come back. If you've got let's say a traditional artist or someone with an artistic background, they are approaching things from the standpoint of making stuff because it's a joy to make it in the first place. It's like there is joy to be gained from the process of producing whatever this artwork is. On the other end of that scale, you've got the teams that are coming at it potentially from a cash grab standpoint or from a development standpoint. And you've got 3 very, very different approaches that are being taken, all ultimately to produce an asset, which is an NFT. So you've got the artist producing it for the joy of producing it. And I would argue that MFers probably to a certain extent fall into this category because there is no roadmap. There is no like utility that's attached to it, and yet they're doing fantastically well. On the other end of the scale, you've got Bobos of War, for example, which is just launched on Solana. Like the white paper for that project is one of the best white papers I've seen on an NFT project, and like some of the alpha that they're dropping in terms of like screenshots from the game and the metaverse they're producing is absolutely incredible. And it looks as though the team has the capability to deliver on what it is that they're saying they're going to deliver on. And then you've also got like the third, which is people who've seen that the art is making people money, don't have an artistic background and are not developers, but still see it as an opportunity to make some fast cash. So again, this is going to be controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. Pixelmon is a fantastic example of that. They just raised 70 mil But the quality of the artwork after the reveal was, and again, art is subjective, so this is obviously only my opinion, but the quality of the artwork basically wasn't worth the 70 mil the total project valuation was.
Are you gonna say Kevin? Are you gonna put a Kevin in there?
I don't know what I couldn't possibly say. So you've got some lackluster apologies from the team as well, saying, "Oh, sorry, but like we'll throw, I don't know, 2 million at improving the artwork at some point in the near future," when like the artists who they got to design the artwork in the first place were paid less than the cost of one of the NFTs submitted. Like the base price of the NFT, they were paid less than that for all of the work. So again, but it raised 70 million USD, which is insane when you think about it. And they have a roadmap and they have like all of this utility which is professed, but ultimately it just, from a cultural standpoint and from a community standpoint, and when you're looking at the way that things are being done in Web3 as a whole, it is very collaborative, it is very open, and it is very it's about kind of like a rising tide lifts all ships, right? Everyone has the opportunity to eat, but then occasionally you'll get something that comes out which is like this, and again, like this is my opinion. It doesn't necessarily do many positive things to the perception of the space from the outside. And then it also, like, artists who are looking at it as a way to connect with a fan base in a way they haven't been able to previously, fantastic. Developers who are seeing it as a way to connect with the community and build a game, fantastic. And then you've got like the narrative being shaped by the third group, who are not necessarily in it for the right reasons. So it's interesting. I think I went off on a bit of a tangent now. I can't remember what the original question was, but yeah, 70 million USD.
What do you reckon, Tom? Is that the right way to look at it? I don't know. What do you think? Is it overvalued there?
Yeah, you make some great points there. And I think the distinctions of those three categories are also important, because I think if it's a one-of-one art, then the emphasis is on the artwork and it's on the creative talent of that piece of work, and it's not necessarily about the ongoing utility or the roadmap or everything associated with 10k PFP projects. So there's differentiations between that. So yeah, I definitely agree there. But yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more more innovative models. I actually wrote about something back in October, and it was, I think, actually the first of its kind at that point. It was kind of like the NFT evolved algorithmically upon each purchase. So it kind of it looked at the user's wallet history and everything they've interacted with, and it kind of changed. And it was an environmental based project around crystal reefs. And it didn't do amazing, I'm not going to say, and I wasn't involved in it, but I wrote a bit about it, and I just found that fascinating, like that the NFT can actually evolve with time. And I think we're going to see a lot more things like that, where we're bringing like innovative models to the space, and it's not just going to be a static PFP or an animation, or we're going to go beyond that. And I think I'm just excited to see what comes out off the back of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree, Tom. Like if you start looking at all of these things, the NFT, the tokens, they're programmable. So if you come from that framing, it's a different way of looking at what they're not a static thing ever. And so that means that, like I have this friend who's a UX guy in Berlin, and he's got this new product, which is a metaverse frame for an NFT. So if you get your Bored Ape, you can frame it in his frame. And I was in a Spaces chat with their team, and they were talking about their programmer was talking about all these use cases of this frame. And obviously everyone knows, it can change, you can change the frame and all that stuff. But what's more interesting is when you hear things like, what if the frame can tell the story? What if the frame is telling a story along with the NFT? Or what if the frame itself has a completely different sort of utility attached to a different storytelling mechanism that can be updated a year from now? And this is really, I think this is really fascinating, especially when you start mixing in metaverse, you know, what could happen in the metaverse and all this stuff. And I think like you're going to start seeing clashes with, you know, entertainment, music, culture in the metaverse with all these NFTs. And so something like a frame is something as, you know, fundamental as a frame that we think of is no longer a frame. It is something else. And we can't, what is that? That's the exciting part. We can't really classify what that even is anymore. And maybe that's the way it should be, that maybe that's what is going to keep, not about excitement, but the, you know, to me, it's like exploration of like worlds unknown. And that's really what, you know, I like to think of that framing in all of the NFTs and really all of Web3 is like that. Blockchains, you know, can be looked at like that too. Like they're sort of like they have a culture in them. They're not just a network. They have culture. They have, you know, Vitalik is attached to, you know, Ethereum in a very like what founder has ever been attached to a network before? You know, and like he's like part of the branding of this whole structure. And I mean, it's being embedded in DeFi, and I think, you know, I come from a small bank marketing. That's kind of my day job in bank marketing. But we always looked at, you know, like when I saw NFTs come out, I was infinitely fascinated with that. These things were able, they're kind of like stamping themselves onto a currency. And that's a really interesting thing when you start getting into communities and decentralization, because if you go way back into, you know, the ancient times when people are trading seashells and all this kind of stuff, like, you know, I don't know, this is just my theory, but imagine like if one area had a certain type of seashell, it only came from that area. And so when you traded it, it was like a special kind of seashell. So it's maybe worth more, but it has a sort of history to it. It has a culture behind it. And I think that's how I think of like the ability to stamp NFT artwork onto a currency system or an economics. And that is really, to me, like, I mean, I love that kind of like thinking, because we can do so much more collaborative thinking around what could be. Yeah, so this is great, and I just love hearing everyone's perspectives.
Nice. Anyone want to jump in on that?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. It's going to be interesting to see, as you said, that kind of how NFTs as themselves evolve over time. Yeah, and like you said about the program, you know, the programmable, and you can make them adaptive and evolve. And I also thought about, because that's kind of one avenue you could take it down, but then a lot of another avenue that I've seen recently is kind of game theory mechanics, so like burning staking. And I think that's another way you could go down it, in terms of like you add in different, you know, you're getting airdrops, NFT airdrops, and the secondary airdrops, and you're adding different mechanisms to the original asset that you have. So there's kind of there's two ways you can go about that. And, you know, from the Bored Ape, you've then got a certain number of assets from that. But yeah, it's just exciting to see how it progresses. And I think we're going to see I don't know, from like a technical aspect, in terms of like game theory of that burning staking. I mean, I know it from like the practical side of it, from interacting with it, but do you have any like insights of how that could be implemented?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a Zoom call with a Marvel a Marvel writer at a comic book, and he's got some NFT goodies coming out on his own. And we talked a lot about, I asked him, I said, because he just came out with this new comic, and we were talking about storytelling and in NFTs and in particular, and just stories, like, and I asked him, like, what would you do if you could if you could take Bored Apes right now, how would you continue the story? What would you do with it from a Marvel, Marvel writing standpoint of character development. And he was like, oh God, I would just go nuts with this thing. Like he said, I really think that's the future of these NFTs, like Bored Apes or the PFPs, especially because they're so, you can build a community of 10,000 people in a matter of, a day. But even one-on-one art, you could do. I think there's some amazing things if you look at it from a storytelling structure. And he was talking about, like, for instance, like taking, everyone knows, like Bored Apes got famous through the mixing of potions inside, they would trade these potions and create mutant apes and all this stuff. And he was like, that's kind of beginner level stuff though. He's like, imagine if you were to wrap a true, like, character development around an ape, just like we do with a Marvel character. Like, this character has these, not only these traits, but they have a whole history. They have like a whole backstory. You can write a whole, you can write an entire narrative or another epic novel on one character. He's like, that's where, but you need a lot of story rule-based things. Like this potion can do exactly this thing, but not this, and this. This character can have these abilities, but not this. And so he said that from that framing, you're able to let the story kind of tell itself. You're not really relying, because the fans will start to build that story because they know the rules now. They know the rules of that particular ape, for instance. So then now you don't have to, you may not need as much utility, right? Because your community is now building that continuation of the story. So I thought it was a pretty kind of fascinating, look at what could be. And he's like, we're just scratching the surface of this stuff. Like, this is beginner level stuff in, the Marvel universe. If we get in there, he was kind of like, I'm kind of biased, but it was interesting though.
Wow, I think it's interesting. Yeah. Well, I got a little like time extension, but I know your time's precious. So if you've got 5 minutes left, maybe you'd like to just each say, what's your kind of hot take on NFTs right now, just for the benefit of the viewer, the reader, the listener. Starting with you, Ben.
Sure. So I think one thing to look into at the moment is what's going on around the gamification side of things. So to add to what Corey was saying there, this idea that you can, to a certain extent, choose your own adventure in terms of the way that the stories can be developed around these entities, around these assets, and ultimately around the characters that are represented by these assets as well. I think games, blockchain games that are making use of NFTs in innovative ways such that you are able to upgrade them to be more kind of representative of what it is that you want to do in the game, such that like you're able to take in, like, I don't know, Skyrim or like any of the Fable games, or like any game where there's moral choices which end up having an impact on your visual identity. Ultimately, anything that is looking into that, which is going to not only allow someone to take ownership of an asset, which will become sought after if there are more people who are playing the game, but then also customize that asset to be more representative of their personality and the kind of experience they want to have in a metaverse. I think that's going to be something that's really, really interesting, because ultimately, like, look what Twitter has done with verification. Twitter verification exists because people want to be able to display their identity. They want to be able to display that this NFT is representative of who I am as a person. This is why I want this tick. This is why I have this hexagon. If you're able to start customizing the NFT itself to be more representative, that's when things are going to start getting really interesting, I think.
Nice. What do you reckon, Tom? What's your hot take?
No, that was really interesting point, actually, on gamification. I would say that back to the kind of the game theory mechanics, I'm really interested in how that's going to play out, and I think a lot of projects are really adopting that as they look at their second iteration of the roadmaps, formation of DAOs, things like that. It's really going to expand the possibilities. of a lot of these projects, and really engage the community in a way which we haven't really seen before. And I just want to, I'm really excited to see that come to life with a lot of projects, and really get that governance, the community governance, the community direction, the creative direction of the community, and really for them to propel the project forward and take a lead in how that narrative plays out. So yeah, like DAOs and those sort of mechanics I'm really interested in.
All right. And finally, I'll give you the honor of wrapping up for us, Corey. What's your kind of parting thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's going to be two, aside from what Ben and Tom said, like there's going to be all of that. And I think that for me, the exciting thing is going to be from a community standpoint. I think we're going to see a lot of collaborations between NFT communities, just like you see in DeFi, right? Like we're partnering with, we're going to share developer resources between communities. And even if these are communities that don't necessarily have structure yet, or I think they're going to be joined by a lot of kind of big vision and mission. And because that's what NFTs do the best, I think, in the artwork framing. And so I think you're going to see a lot of sharing of, if they share enough values, you're going to see a lot of talent, whether it's like, people in Hollywood or people in film, or they're developers or artists or writers, whatever. You're going to see a lot of collaborations between the communities, not just in the exterior, the customer facing standpoint. There's already that going on, but I think it's just like with DeFi, you're going to see protocols being shared and things like that. And then I think the second big thing is going to be a metaverse explosion, where the NFTs is going to, especially with virtual fashion, I think you're going to see a really interesting stuff happen where virtual fashion, music, land, all that stuff is going to like clash with the NFTs and the artists, and it's going to be a wild, fun like ride. I think it's going to be really cool.